Welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from July 16th, 2021, and I'm recording this a little bit earlier than normal. I'm recording this on Wednesday, January 12th, 2022. As always, what we're trying to do here is understand what made the comics hot 6 months ago, what's happened to them in the market since, so we can all make a little better decisions. We're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. They each put out a list of 10 books. So we combine those two lists. This week we got 18 books between them to see what those hot comics were, why they were hot, and see if we can all make a little bit better decisions about the books we chase in the moment and the books we're just patient on. And if you've been watching here lately, lots of books you should have just been patient on. So let's get into this week's list and see what we can learn. First up, we got Chariot number 1. This hit the list because it was optioned by Warner Brothers. Back then, raw copies jumped all the way up to $20 to $30. And if you've watched this list at all in the last 3 years, you know option news means be patient. This book is now a $5 to $15 book. You can definitely get it for cover price. 9.8 will cost you $50 to $80. So this one definitely turned into, I put down I'll Be Back. This one definitely turned into a trap. Definitely down significantly from what it was. Definitely a book that would have been worth just waiting on. Next, we have G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero number 1. This is obviously the first appearance of G.I. Joe in comics. This book was jumping up in the spring because we got a Snake Eyes trailer, and then we also got an announcement that supposedly they're working on a new cartoon series. I don't know that we've heard anything about that recently. Back then, raw copies were averaging around $280. A 9.8 hit $2,000. Now a raw copy will cost you $50 to $200 depending on condition. So even the higher grade stuff have dropped back a little bit. 9.8 dropped back a little bit, not a lot. $1,500 to $1,700 for a 9.8. That's excluding newsstands. Those will still cost you over $2,000. So I thought this one might continue to go up. It was a book that maybe was slightly undervalued, but it hasn't really. It's kind of come back a little bit. So might bump again if we actually get more news about that cartoon series or if it actually happens. Next, we got Silver Surfer Black number 2, the Giuseppe Camicoli San Diego Comic-Con variant. This is pretty hard to find. Back then, raw copies were going for $250 to $300. Now there's only been 2 sales on eBay in the last 3 months. 9.6 went for $235. A 9.8 went for $700. And then all the listings are just crazy priced. Are way higher than, or quite a bit higher than those two sales. Raw copies quite a bit higher. I think it was like $600, the one raw copy that was listed in. They're just not moving because of that. So I put this as kind of steady because I think if somebody actually posted them at these prices, at the prices from 6 months ago and what we're seeing, that it would probably sell. But a little bit of a conjecture here, a little bit of interpretation of what's going on based on the listing prices. Next, we have Sensational She-Hulk number 40. This is the infamous jump rope issue. Back then, 9.6s were hitting $600 plus, which is a big number. And I double-checked this. It was 9.6s they were talking about. Now, raw copies are costing you $100 to $250, and 9.8 is $550 to $700. Those 9.6s have dropped over 50%. They're now $250 to $300 for a 9.6 on this book. I thought this one might be worth it with the She-Hulk show coming. This is kind of a fun, little different issue. It's always had a market, but no, there's really hasn't sustained those prices from back then. Now it turned into a bit of a trap and definitely has dropped back significantly. Next, we're going to move into Canto 3, Lionhearted number 1. So the third volume of Canto here. This is Lionhearted number 1. This is the Jorge Corona 1 in 25. Back then, raw copies of this 1 in 25 were going for $30 to $40, which is not really that hot for a 1 in 25. Didn't even make double ratio, which usually means it'll settle at about ratio or less. And that's what it's done. It's now a $20 to $40 book. So it's been staying in that same range, but you can definitely get it for right at ratio. I call this one steady because it wasn't that high to begin with, but definitely an I'll Be Back. You can definitely find some deals on this. Although there's not a ton of them listed or out there, but they're still going for very reasonable prices. Next, we have Ghostbusters number 14. This was a 1 in 10 variant. This is is a Taxi Driver homage to the Taxi Driver movie poster. Back then, there were several raw sales going for $200 to $400 plus. Now the only recent sale is a raw sale for $170. So another one that turned into a bit of an I'll Be Back. There's a few listed for higher prices that aren't going for anything or aren't selling. So definitely turned into a bit of an I'll Be Back. That probably 200 seems like maybe an area it'll move, but not that $400 price that it was topping out at back then. Next, we have Wildcats number 1. Yes, Wildcats number 1 from the 90s, but this is the newsstand version specifically. Basically, rumors that DC was going to bring back this team and start another book is what causes it to happen. I don't think we've heard anything since then, or I haven't seen anything. I know they've been using Grifter quite a bit, but like in Bat-related books, but I haven't seen any of the other characters. But anyway, that caused this book, the newsstand version, to jump all the way up to $25 to $30. It's now a $5 to $15 book. I'm guessing you can still find bunches of these in dollar bins pretty much everywhere. 9.8 will cost you $150 to $200 again of the newsstand. The regular wouldn't cost you nearly this much. So the other one that turned into a bit of a trap, definitely down from what it was. Next, we got Nice House on the Lake, number 1. This was the hot new comic from James Tynion. Basically, and this was the news that it was going to be a maxi instead of a miniseries, so it was going to be 12 issues instead of 6. And back then, it cost raw copies to jump to $15 to $20 as people were really into this book. And this one's just been super steady over the last 6 months. It's still a $15, $20 book. A 9.8 will cost you $80 to $100. Still a lot of interest on this series. It's currently in hiatus. I think till March is when the next issue is supposed to come out. At least it's in the previews catalog for coming out in March. We'll see if it comes out on time. Kind of the last thing Tynion's doing before he really focuses on his own Substack and that kind of stuff. He's leaving DC, so yeah, we'll see once this gets wrapped up how quickly this comes out. Next, we got Infinity War number 1, the first appearance of the Doppelgangers. Basically, the characters returned in Extreme Carnage Scream in that book, so it caused a little boost in interest. Not sure how hot this really was. Raw copies were only going for $10. A 9.8 did go for $100. Not a lot here. Still going for $5 to $15. 9.8, $70 to $100. So this one's pretty steady, but definitely an I'll Be Back because you can find a little bit of a deal here. But yeah, this really hasn't done a whole lot. Not sure why the interest necessarily, why just them coming back would cause this kind of bump, but it was a really small one. So the rest of the list, so that was 9 books. The rest of the last 9 books are all MCU related in some way, shape, or form. Let me scroll up here so I can see them all. And first up, we have Astonishing Ant-Man number 12. This is the issue where Darren Cross becomes Yellow Jacket. And basically the actor confirmed that he was returning in Ant-Man 3. So that's what caused this book to jump up to a $20 book. Still not super high. Now it's a $5 to $10 book. 9.8 will literally only cost you $30 to $50 shipped. It was like 20 plus shipping on that low end one. So definitely turned into a bit of a trap. Again, characters supposedly coming back, but just not a ton of interest here. Next, we have Black Widow Prelude, number 1. This is the limited overseas photo variant. There's several different variants of this if you look this up, but this is the one that was limited, only released overseas. Back then, raw copies were going for $60. Now they're going $20 to $35, although it's actually, when you figure in shipping and that kind of stuff, it's a little more, but back because most of them are still coming from overseas. But yeah, this one definitely still turned into a bit of a trap. Book is definitely down from what it was when it was first coming out and hard to get here, so people were chasing this particular version, plus the movie had just come out. Next, we have Incredible Hulk number 258. the first appearance of the Soviet Super Soldiers team, and that includes Ursa Major. And obviously we got the arm wrestling guy was claiming after the fact that was in Black Widow that he was Ursa Major. So that's why this hit the list. Back then, raw copies were going for 50, and 9.8 hit 500. 9.8s are still going in the 4 to 550 range, but there's only been 3 sales. Raw copies are down $10 to $30, with most of them being under 20. So this one definitely turned into another trap. Not a ton of interest here, and if that guy really was Ursa Major, I'm guessing we're not getting him again in anything. So with that, a character we are getting again, and probably going to get several times, is Yelena Belova, and the next book is Inhumans #5, her first appearance. This basically was on opposite lists from last week when we talked about it. Raw copies were $120 back then, 9.8 going for $800, and basically same as what we found last week. Raw copies are pretty steady in that $100 to $200 range, occasionally even a little higher than they were, but 9.8s have come back significantly, more in the $500 to $600 range for a 9.8. Florence Pugh crushed this role. She had a really big breakout, but even with her reappearance in Hawkeye here just recently, the book is still down for graded copies. It's holding its own right where it was at, though, for raw copies. Next, well, really, the last 5 books of the list all have something to do with the same character, and that is Kang. We got his first appearance in the Loki show about this time, and that's what was going on here. Or first appearance of a version of Kang on the Loki show. And first up, we have Avengers #2, also on the list for the second week in a row. But this one is not opposite list. This one just kept going up. This is the Alex Ross Kang variant. Last week we were talking about it at 5 to 10, and it was basically, I'll be back, but pretty steady. This week, by this point, it was up to $25 to $30. Now it's a $5 to $20 book. 9.8 will cost you about $70. So this is still an I'll be back. Definitely worth waiting on. It's still kind of a cool cover if you're really interested in collecting this character, but not really much other than the cover going on here. Next, we have Thor 245. This is the first appearance of He Who Remains, which is the kind of the version. Although He Who Remains, in the comics, I don't think was actually a version of Kang, but it is the version of Kang we got in the show. Back then, raw copies were up to averaging around 70, and 9.6 got all the way up to 580. Now, a raw copy will cost you 10 to 35, with most of the copies being 20 or maybe even less than that. So this one definitely turned into a dumpster fire. We saw this version of Kang get killed, so yeah, it doesn't look like we're going to get this version anymore, and people just aren't really interested. Something to think about when you know these are going to be kind of one-off characters and just cameo appearances and that kind of stuff in these shows. Do you really want to chase these books, or just be patient on them? So next we have Avengers #269. This is the origin of Kang as Rama Tut, plus it's Kang versus Immortus battle. Back then, raw copies were going for 20, a 9.8 was going for 200. Not sure really where the tie-in other than the Rama Tut origin thing was with the show. It was just kind of a Kang book for people to collect. Now it's going for 5 to 20, 9.8 going for 180. So it hasn't dropped a ton, but it's definitely turned into an I'll be back. You can definitely do better than you could back then. Next, second to last, is Avengers #267. This is the first appearance of the Council of Kangs. Back then, this jumped all the way up to $40 to $80. I thought, because there is some firsts here, this might actually be worth it. Not really. It's now a $10 to $50 book. So still some of the higher grade copies are going in that low end of what it was going before, but definitely down overall. 9.8 will cost you $250 to $350, which is not that unusual for a $40, $50 book, but this $20, $30 book, that's maybe a little high. You'll see, but obviously that's kind of where the book is at. And then last but not least, we have Avengers #8, the first appearance of Kang the Conqueror. Back then, 9.2 hit an all-time high of 8,500. A 7.0 hit 4,000. Couldn't really find recent sales of those on eBay, but 9.4s are going. The most recent 9.4 went for 9,700. 9.0 went for 59. Overall, it looks like it's been very steady on this book over the last 6 months. We got that bump, and it's kind of just sat there. This one hasn't really backed up a lot. Occasionally, you've been able to find some deals. Raw copies on this basically start about $250, even for low grade stuff, and run you to well over $1,000, depending on how high the grade is. So that is this week's list. A lot of Kang here at the end, but you'll notice we didn't say up on a single book. We had several steadies, but mostly down again. This has been a pretty common pattern after going through most of last summer, where I do this list and it'd be about split even, or about 50-50 with up and down, with a few scattered steadies thrown in there. The last few months, the market is definitely shifting back, having a correction, as we get lots of weeks where we have no ups, or maybe one or two at the most. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.